Ever wondered how the world of finance and economics truly operates? I mean, not just the daily headlines, but the deep foundational forces that shape, well, everything around us.
Yeah, the things that shape our prosperity. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some of the most groundbreaking ideas ever conceived about wealth, labor, markets, the real building blocks.
And our guide for this journey is an absolute cornerstone of economic thought, a monumental work, really.
It is, even though it was written centuries ago, its insights are still incredibly sharp. We've got extensive excerpts, and honestly, they illuminate so much about how things work now.
So our mission today is to unpack these timeless ideas, make them really clear for you. We're starting simple, like how do you even make a pin efficiently?
Right, and from there, we'll build up to the big stuff, the complex flow of national capital, how value is determined, that sort of thing.
Get ready for some hopefully profound aha moments.
No.
This should really change how you see the economic world. Okay, let's get into it. Segment one, how we create wealth together. It all starts, maybe surprisingly, with just labor,
Yeah.
our work.
And specifically, how productive that labor is. There's this fascinating point right at the start of our material that even the lowest, poorest worker in what we'd call a civilized society can often get more of life's necessities,
More than,
more than, say, a savage, as the text puts it, someone living in a more isolated, self-sufficient way. And the reason is the vastly increased productive powers of labor.
okay, so how does that happen? How do we get more productive?
Well, the key insight, the really famous one, is the division of labor. Think about making pins. It sounds trivial, right?
Yeah, just a pin.
But if you tried to make one all by yourself, start to finish, our source estimates you might make, maybe one pin a day, perhaps 20 if you really hustled.
Okay, not many.
Now, picture the pin factory example. The whole process is split up. One person draws the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, someone else sharpens the point, another person puts the head on. Maybe 18 distinct tasks.
Specialization.
Exactly. And when the work is divided like that, the output just explodes. 10 people could make maybe 48,000 pins a day.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge difference. So breaking down tasks massively increases output.
Massively. It applies to almost every industry, every art and manufacture, as the text says. It's the fundamental driver of efficiency.
And there's another effect too, right, about invention.
Yes, that's a great point. When a worker focuses their entire attention on just one simple task, they're much more likely to figure out quicker, easier ways to do it, or even invent a machine to help.
Makes sense. You're staring at the same small problem all day.
Right. So the division of labor itself leads to inventions that make labor even more productive. It's a kind of positive feedback loop.
Okay, so specialization boosts productivity. But why do we humans even do this? Animals seem pretty self-sufficient.
That's a core difference highlighted in the text. Humans, unlike most animals, seem to constantly need the help and cooperation of, well, vast numbers of other people, way more than you could get just through friendship.
We can't rely on everyone liking us enough to help us out all the time.
Pretty much. We need a different mechanism, and that mechanism is exchange. The source uses this great analogy of a bow maker.
Go on.
So if someone gets really good at making bows and arrows, it becomes more efficient for them to just focus on that.
And trade them.
Exactly. Trade the bows and arrows for cattle or venison that someone else hunted, rather than trying to hunt and make bows. You specialize in what you do best and trade for the rest.
So this natural drive to truck, barter, and exchange, as the source puts it.
Yes, that drive transforms society. People start living by exchanging, and that fundamentally creates what the source calls a commercial society.
Okay, that clicks. Specialize, trade, society shifts. But there must be limits, right? What if no one wants your specialized thing?
Absolutely. The extent of this division is limited by the extent of the market. There's a brilliant example given.
Which
A nail maker, a smith, in a remote part of the Scottish Highlands. This guy could apparently make maybe 300,000 nails a year. Tremendous output for one person.
Wow, okay.
But the local market was so tiny, so isolated, he probably couldn't sell even 1,000 nails a single day's work in a whole year.
So he couldn't specialize as much as he was capable of.
Precisely. He couldn't exchange the surplus. This shows how vital the market size is, and that brings in things like transportation.
How so?
Well, things like water carriage, ships, canals. They open up wider markets. Suddenly, our Highland nailer isn't just selling to his village. Maybe he can sell to a whole region or even export.
And a bigger market means you can specialize more, produce more, and everyone gets wealthier.
That's the idea. Better transport broadens the market, which allows for greater division of labor, which boosts industry and prosperity. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so cooperation and exchange build this commercial society. But
Hmm.
barter sounds clunky. Like, how do you trade half an ox for a loaf of bread?
Exactly. That's the next crucial piece. Money. The source describes early exchange as often being clogged and embarrassed by the difficulties of barter.
Clogged and embarrassed. I like
Yeah.
that.
Imagine you're a butcher, you have plenty of meat, but you need bread or salt or ale. The baker or brewer might not need a whole ox or sheep right now.
Right. You can't easily divide your ox without, well, ruining it. Make small trades almost impossible.
It was a huge barrier. So society naturally looked for a better medium of exchange, something durable, something divisible, something people generally valued.
And that led to metals. Gold, silver, copper.
Pretty much. But even then, there were problems. How much metal are you getting? Is it pure? Weighing it took time, testing it was difficult.
You needed some kind of guarantee.
Precisely. And that's where coinage comes in. Governments started putting public stamps on bits of metal. These stamps were meant to certify both the quantity, the weight, and the uniform goodness, meaning the fineness or purity.
Like a quality seal. You mentioned medieval cloth stamps.
Exactly like that. A guarantee from an authority. And early money names often reflected actual weights. The Roman as, or pondo, was literally a Roman pound of copper.
And the English pound sterling.
Originally, a pound tower weight of silver, of a specific known fineness, so the name meant something tangible.
But weighing every transaction is still slow.
Right. So eventually, for convenience, people started accepting coins by tale, just by counting them, trusting the stamp. This sped things up enormously for everyday commerce.
Okay, so money evolves for convenience. But what's the deeper insight here? What does money really represent according to our source?
This is maybe one of the most profound points. The real value isn't the metal or the paper note later on, it's the power of purchasing.
Purchasing what?
Purchasing a certain command over all the labor or over all the produce of labor, which is then in the market. Your wealth isn't the coins in your pocket, it's what those coins allow you to command from others.
So money is just a claim check on actual goods and services produced by labor.
You could put it that way. It's a symbol of purchasing power, which leads to the next big idea. If money is just a symbol, what's the real standard of value?
Labor.
Exactly. The source is emphatic. Labor alone, therefore, never varying in its own value, is alone the ultimate and real standard by which the value of all commodities can at all times and places be estimated and compared. Money gives you the nominal price, but labor is the real price.
Never varying in its own value. That's interesting. Does that mean an hour of labor is always worth the same effort to the laborer?
That seems to be the implication. The effort, the toil, the sacrifice is the fundamental cost. This has practical consequences for long-term comparisons.
Like with rents.
Yes, rents set in corn, a basic necessity produced by labor, tended to hold their real value much better over centuries than rents set in money, even if the coins themselves didn't change much in name or stated silver content.
Why is that?
Because the price of labor itself fluctuates in money terms, and it's incredibly hard to know the current prices of labor accurately across distant times and places. Corn provides a more stable benchmark of what labor can produce and sustain.
Okay, we've got wealth creation through cooperation, money making exchange easier. Now, how does the value, the price of things, actually get determined and distributed?
Right. The source breaks down the price of almost any commodity into three core components:
Which are?
wages, profit, and rent. The wage paid for the labor involved, the profit earned on the capital or stock used, and the rent paid for the land required.
And these three streams of income support the three main groups in society.
That's the framework. Those who live by wages, those who live by profit from their capital, and those who live by rent from owning land.
Let's tackle wages first. What decides how much someone earns? It's not just supply and demand, is it?
No, the source points to several other factors. One is the sheer hardship or unpleasantness of the job.
Like the coal heavers you mentioned.
Exactly. The London coal heavers earned more partly because of the hardship, dirtiness, and disagreeableness of the work. People need extra compensation for that.
Makes sense. What else?
Skill and trust are huge. An apothecary's skill is seen as much nicer and more delicate than a basic craftsperson's, and the level of trust placed in them dealing with health, life, and death justifies higher pay.
So, difficulty, skill, trust.
What about things like prestige?
That plays a role too, but sometimes in reverse. Professions like law, the army, academia, they might be under-recompensed purely in money terms.
Meaning they pay less than the difficulty might suggest.
Yes, but they attract people because of the potential for reputation, public admiration, or sometimes just a person's natural confidence in own abilities. They think they'll rise to the top. Non-money rewards matter.
Okay, that's fascinating. Now, there's a point in here about employers, about masters.
Ah, yes, this is quite revealing. The source notes that we often hear about workers combining to raise wages.
Strikes and unions, basically. Right. But it argues that we rarely hear about combinations of masters to keep wages down or prevent them from rising, yet it claims masters are always and everywhere in a sort of tacit but constant and uniform combination, not to raise wages.
A tacit conspiracy, almost.
That's the implication. It's not necessarily illegal or overt, but a shared understanding among employers to resist wage increases, a very different power dynamic.
Wow. Okay. But despite this, the text seems quite positive about high wages overall.
Extremely positive. There's this powerful statement: the liberal reward of labor is the necessary effect and the natural symptom of increasing national wealth.
Yeah.
And it goes further. It's not just an effect of wealth, it's also a cause of increasing population and prosperity.
So complaining about high wages is like complaining about prosperity itself.
That's exactly the argument. To complain of it is to lament over the necessary cause and effect of the greatest public prosperity. Good wages fuel growth.
And there's that counterintuitive point about free versus slave labor, too.
Yes. The observation was that even in places with high wages like colonial Boston, New York, Philadelphia, the work done by free laborers actually ended up being cheaper in the end than work done by slaves.
Cheaper even with high wages. How?
The implication is that freedom, motivation, and perhaps better care lead to significantly higher productivity, outweighing the wage cost difference, a remarkable economic argument for liberty.
Okay, moving from wages to profit, this is the reward for the business owner, the undertaker.
Yes, the reward for hazarding their stock, their capital. It has to cover more than just the cost of materials and wages they paid out. It's their compensation for the risk and for organizing the whole venture.
And profit is related to interest rates.
Directly. Interest is basically the price paid for borrowing capital. It's the compensation which the borrower pays to the lender for the profit which he has an opportunity of making by the use of the money. High potential profits tend to mean higher interest rates, and vice versa.
Do high wages and high profits go together?
Usually not, according to the source. They tend to squeeze each other. The exception might be in new colonies where land is plentiful, but labor and capital are scarce, creating unusual conditions where both can be high temporarily.
Now, there's a point about how increases in wages and profits affect prices differently. Something about simple versus compound interest.
Yes, this is quite subtle but important. A rise in wages tends to increase prices arithmetically, like simple interest. If wages go up at each stage, the price goes up by a certain amount at each stage.
Okay.
But a rise in the rate of profit acts like compound interest. If profits are, say, 10% at each stage, that 10% is applied to the accumulated cost, including the profits from earlier stages. It pyramids.
Ah, so profit increases have a much bigger multiplying effect on the final price.
Exactly. A small increase in the profit rate across multiple stages of production and distribution can lead to a much larger increase in the final selling price compared to a similar rise in wages.
Got it. Okay, third component, rent, the landlord's share. The source sounds a bit critical here.
It's definitely presented differently. Rent is described as the price paid for the use of land, and it's something landlords demand for the natural produce of the land, even though they didn't necessarily labor to create that natural productivity. They love to reap where they never sowed.
So it arises purely from ownership, once land becomes private property.
That's the idea. And crucially, rent is described as naturally a monopoly price.
Monopoly price. Meaning
It's not determined by what the landlord invested or what it costs them. It's determined by the maximum what the farmer can afford to give, leaving the farmer just enough to cover costs and average profit. The landlord extracts the surplus because they control a necessary limited resource.
And this links to how land gets used, right? Corn versus cattle.
Yes. As a society gets wealthier, demand for things like meat and dairy often rises faster than demand for basic grains like corn. This pushes up the price of meat and dairy.
Which makes raising animals more profitable.
Eventually, yes. It can become profitable enough to convert even fertile land that could grow corn into pasture or land for growing animal feed, just because the rent and profit from animal products is higher. Market prices driven by rent and profit, dictate land use.
All right, we've seen how the pie is divided. Now let's look at the engine that makes the pie bigger. Capital. The source divides society's general stock into different types, right?
Yes, primarily into two main categories: circulating capital and fixed capital. The distinction is quite clear and useful.
Okay, what's circulating capital?
This is the stuff that yields revenue or profit only by being, well, circulated or changing hands. It includes things like raw materials that will be transformed, provisions for workers, finished goods in warehouses waiting to be sold that have to be constantly replenished.
And money itself falls into this category.
Yes, money is seen as a particular branch of circulating capital, the wheel that makes the rest of it turn over.
Okay, so what's fixed capital then?
Fixed capital yields revenue without circulating or changing masters. Think of useful machines, tools of a trade, profitable buildings like workshops or warehouses, improvements made to land like drainage or fencing.
Things that last and help production over time.
Exactly. And interestingly, the source also includes the acquired and useful abilities of the people, their skills and education as a form of fixed capital vested in the person.
Human capital. That's a very modern idea. And like physical capital, it needs upkeep.
Definitely. The expense of maintaining fixed capital repairing machines, maintaining buildings, is compared to the necessary repairs in a private estate. You have to spend money to keep it productive and generating revenue.
Now, how do banks fit into this picture of capital? They seem pretty important in the source material.
Hugely important. The magic of banks, especially through the use of paper money, is highlighted. By providing loans and allowing creditable traders, trustworthy business people, to operate using paper notes or credit instead of keeping large hoards of gold and silver.
They free up capital.
Precisely. Banks effectively dispense businesses from having large parts of their stock locked up as idle cash. That capital can then be put to work, invested in materials, machinery, wages, actively generating more profit.
And the impact was significant.
Oh, yes. The source gives concrete examples. Glasgow's trade apparently doubled in about 15 years after its first proper banks were set up. And Scotland's overall trade is said to have more than quadrupled since its main public banks were established.
That's incredible growth, attributed largely to banking freeing up capital.
It suggests banks act as a massive lubricant and catalyst for economic activity.
Is there a downside mentioned? Can banking or paper money go wrong?
Yes. There's a clear warning about overissuing paper money. If banks issue more paper than the economy actually needs for transactions, the excess continually returning to the banks to be exchanged for gold and silver.
Which drains the bank's reserves and devalues the paper.
Exactly. It can degrade the value of the paper money. The source explicitly mentions the distress that Scottish banks faced at times due to excessive circulation. So it's powerful, but needs prudent management.
Okay, so banks help deploy capital. But what fundamentally creates more capital in the first place? Is it just about working hard?
This is another really key insight. The source argues quite strongly that parsimony and not industry is the immediate cause of the increase of capital.
Parsimony, meaning thrift, saving, not just hard work.
Right. Industry provides the potential revenue, but it's only the portion of that revenue that is saved, not immediately consumed, that gets added to capital. Saving is what allows for investment and growth.
So it draws a distinction between, like, frugal people and spendthrifts.
Very much so. The prodigality of some who spend wastefully essentially consumes resources without adding to productive capacity. They might be seen as feeding the idle with the bread of the industrious.
Impoverishing the country, potentially.
Yes. But the frugality of others who save and invest compensates for this and drives accumulation. It's this constant, quiet effort by individuals to better their own condition through saving that builds up the nation's capital stock over time.
And this process is seen as pretty resilient.
Remarkably so. There's this wonderful analogy comparing society's drive to accumulate capital to the unknown principle of animal life.
How so?
It suggests this drive is so powerful it often restores economic health and vigor, in spite not only of the disease, but of the absurd prescriptions of the doctor.
The disease being economic downturns and the doctor being bad government policies.
That's the clear implication. It's a fundamentally optimistic view of the economy's innate tendency towards growth through private saving and investment, even when facing obstacles.
We've covered the sort of natural mechanics of the economy: labor, money, capital. Now let's talk about the role of government. How do its actions as policies affect these forces?
Well, the source spends a lot of time discussing how government intervention, or policy as it's often called, can create significant obstructions to natural liberty.
Obstructions. In what way?
It argues that European policies of the time created economic inequalities of much greater importance than any natural differences between people or places.
How do they do that?
Mainly in three ways. First, by restraining competition in certain jobs, basically limiting who could do them.
Okay.
Second, by increasing competition in other areas more than would happen naturally. And third, by obstructing the free movement of labor and capital, preventing people or money from easily shifting between jobs or locations.
Can you give an example of restraining competition?
The classic example is the guild system, the exclusive privileges of corporations. Through long apprenticeship requirements, often 7 years, guilds effectively limited the number of people who could legally practice a trade within a town.
Keeping supply low and prices or wages high for the insiders.
That was the effect, yes. Which leads to that very famous, rather cynical quote.
The one about people in the same trade.
That's the one. People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion. But the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices.
A pretty stark warning about collusion, even informal collusion.
It is. And beyond guilds, things like the law of settlements also blocked movement. A poor worker often couldn't easily move from one parish to another to find better work without a special certificate.
Which could cause big wage differences between nearby places just because people couldn't move freely.
Exactly, an artificial barrier.
Okay, so that's intervention by restriction. What about government getting its own revenue taxation?
Ah, yes. The source lays out 4 fundamental maxims for good taxation. They still get discussed today.
What are they?
First, equality. People should contribute in proportion to their ability, typically meaning in proportion to the revenue they enjoy under the protection of the state.
Fair share, basically. Second,
Certainty. The tax each person pays should be certain, not arbitrary. The time, manner, and amount should all be clear. Uncertainty creates opportunities for corruption or oppression.
makes sense.
Third, convenience. Taxes should be levied at the time or in the manner that is most likely to be convenient for the contributor to pay it, like taxing goods when they're bought.
Don't make it unnecessarily difficult to pay.
Yeah.
And fourth,
Economy.
No.
Every tax ought to be contrived to take out and keep out of the pockets of the people as little as possible over and above what it brings into the public treasury. Minimize collection costs and economic distortions.
equality, certainty, convenience, economy. Sound principles. How did actual taxes measure up?
Well, the source critiques various taxes. The land tax in Britain, for example, was based on old valuations and had become very unequal over time.
Not meeting the equality principle.
Right. A tax on windows, though, was seen as having certainty you could easily count windows. But taxes on consumables, while it may be convenient to pay bit by bit, they were often expensive to collect, requiring tax officers, preventing smuggling, and could discourage industry or push people towards untaxed alternatives. Always trade-offs.
Okay, taxes are one thing. What about government borrowing public debt?
This is presented as a major concern. The core idea is that a want of parsimony in time of peace imposes the necessity of contracting debt in time of war.
Meaning, if governments don't live within their means during peacetime, they have no choice but to borrow heavily when war breaks out.
Exactly. And efforts to pay down this debt often fail. The source discusses Britain's sinking fund, intended to gradually reduce debt, but the money often got diverted to fund new wars or other expenses before it could make a real dent.
So the debt just keeps growing. What's the long-term impact?
The argument is that while funding wars with debt avoids imposing crushing taxes immediately, it burdens future generations who have to pay the interest and principal. Crucially, it also impairs the nation's ability to accumulate capital because resources that could have gone into private investment are diverted to servicing government debt. It acts as a drag on growth.
A serious long-term consequence. Finally, what about government meddling in international trade? Colonies and monopolies.
Yes, this is a major critique of the prevailing mercantile system of the time. Policies like granting a monopoly of the colony trade to British merchants were intended to enrich Britain by boosting merchants' profits.
But did they work, according to the source?
The argument is largely no, or at least not optimally. The monopoly might have raised profits in that specific colonial trade, but it did so by artificially drawing capital away from other, potentially more productive trades where Britain might have had a natural advantage.
So it distorted the natural flow of capital.
Yes, reducing the overall capital efficiency and potentially making Britain less competitive in European markets or other ventures. It served the monopolists, perhaps, but not necessarily the nation as a whole.
And this ties into a broader view of trade.
It does. The source condemns the pernicious mercantile idea that a nation's interest lies in beggaring all their neighbors, trying to get rich by making other countries poor through trade restrictions.
Instead of seeing trade as mutually beneficial.
Exactly. This attitude turns commerce from a potential bond of union and friendship into a source of discord and animosity. Again, there's a hint of whose interests are really being served.
And the merchants?
Well, it notes how merchants often complain loudly about high wages hurting competitiveness, but were usually silent about the high profits of stock, which also raised prices. A self-serving argument.
And the final verdict on building empires just for trade advantages.
It's pretty scathing. To found a great empire for the sole purpose of raising up a people of customers is dismissed as a project fit only for a nation of shopkeepers. A critique of prioritizing narrow commercial gains over broader national well-being or, perhaps, justice.
Yeah, okay. We have covered a lot of ground today. Let's try to recap the big picture.
We started with the power of the division of labor, how specialization makes us incredibly productive.
Right, making us all much wealthier collectively than we could ever be alone. Then we saw how money evolved to make the resulting exchange possible, but that labor itself is the real ultimate measure of value.
Exactly. Not the coin, but the effort. Then we broke down price into its core parts. Wages for labor, profit for capital and risk, and rent for land.
And saw how those flow as revenue to different groups, and how factors like hardship, skill, monopoly power, and even non-money rewards influence those shares.
We then looked at capital circulating and fixed as the engine of growth, fueled primarily by saving, by parsimony, and how resilient that accumulation process can be.
And finally, we explored how government actions, regulations like guilds, taxation, public debt, trade monopolies interact with, and sometimes obstruct, these more natural economic forces.
Often with unintended consequences or consequences that benefit specific groups rather than the public generally.
So these ideas, even though they come from centuries ago, they really aren't just, academic dust. They help explain so much about today.
Absolutely. Why some jobs pay more than others, why certain goods are cheap or expensive, how interest rates work, the impact of national debt, why international trade can be both beneficial and contentious.
It gives you, the listener, a framework, a lens, to understand the economic forces shaping your own life, your industry, and the prosperity of the society you live in.
It really does. Which leads us to maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
Okay, so considering how much of our economic reality seems driven by these fundamental principles, division of labor, exchange, capital accumulation versus deliberate government policy, what are some things in our modern economy, maybe deeply ingrained beliefs or common practices, that if we really unpacked them using this kind of analysis might reveal a similar kind of, well, absurdity, as the source puts it, or maybe even a subtle conspiracy against the public? What might a truly natural system of perfect liberty and justice look like today, and what could that mean for you?
That's definitely something to think about. What hidden assumptions or structures are shaping our world in ways we don't always see? Food for thought.